Part 1. The Forgotten Stories of Taxes, Gold, and Money. Quote, "You will never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete." Buckminster Fuller. Chapter 1. The Big Question.
The U.S. tax code is one of the enduring mysteries of our time. It is a Frankenstein of a document that has been modified, expanded, pulled apart, and patched back together with special provisions until it became so complex that no one can agree upon how many pages long it is. By most accounts, however, it is well over 70,000 pages. Think about that for one moment. 70,000 pages. If the average adult read one page in 1.7 minutes, it would take roughly 2,000 hours of dedicated reading to get through that volume. For those keeping score at home, that translates to approximately 83 days of page turning, assuming the reader does not sleep or take breaks. It might be easy to shrug off the notion of this gargantuan tax code as just another example of bureaucratic excess if this singular document didn't influence so much of modern life. But it does. This nearly impenetrable treatise lays out some of the most fundamental aspects of our society. It influences the size and scope of the federal government. It funds everything from social safety nets to the military, agricultural support to public health, and food safety to interstate highways. It also determines who exactly will bear the brunt of supplying those revenues, who will be exempted, and how taxes will be collected. One might think that such an important document would be carefully constructed and grounded in the best ideas from the fields of economics, finance, technology, and public administration. One might also assume that careful reasoning, science, and mathematical modeling went into this vital code that guides so much of our lives and livelihoods. But to think that would be to overlook the long, haphazard, and political history of taxation and monetary policy in the U.S. Despite the many, many provisions and priorities in the tax code, there is one clear aspect of this document that has become its defining characteristic, and that is the emphasis on taxing individual income. By far, the lion's share of federal tax revenue is gathered from the paychecks of working Americans. Before the economic downturn of the pandemic in the U.S., the Internal Revenue Service collected approximately $3.4 trillion in revenue annually, with about 86% of this revenue coming from taxing individual salaries, specifically in the form of income, Social Security, and Medicare taxes, often described collectively as payroll taxes. Many people think of corporations as contributors to the tax base, but that is true only to a small extent. Today, only about 6% of the government's revenue comes from taxing the profits of corporations. In fact, many top companies with billions in profits legally pay no taxes at all under the rules and regulations of our complex and inequitable tax code. So the first question we must ask is why? If there are so many different types of taxes at their disposal, why does the U.S. lean so heavily on taxing individual citizens' incomes as its primary revenue source? The answer rests in the long lens of history. To observe clearly, we need to understand when and why the U.S. federal government first began raising revenue through taxing individuals' income. Back in 1789, when the U.S. was forming as a nation, what exactly did the Founding Fathers think about the different types of taxes they might levy upon the people? Did the founders want the government to tax the income and wages of the workers? Moving forward through history, What events and principles prompted Congress to tax a salary income in a progressively higher set of brackets? If we examine our tax system with fresh eyes and look for the historical events that triggered the implementation of the progressive income tax system that we have today, we might also be able to understand how today's tax system became filled with so many special interest loopholes and benefits, which, in turn, unjustifiably burden those taxpayers who are not exempt. The outdated Internal Revenue Code that we presently operate under, with all its preferential treatment of special interests over general interests, is a system of structuring and filing tax returns that is inequitable, inefficient, and costly. Wealth creation, or the creation of abundance, is generally a very positive and dynamic goal of any society. Individuals want a society that operates as a true meritocracy, where opportunity is equal and work is justly rewarded. However, in the current tax system, the wealthy, often entities with special interests, and the politically connected, receive exemptions that allow them to legally avoid paying taxes, while the less politically connected middle class and upper middle class, dependent on their salaries, have become victims left to carry a disproportionate share of the tax burden, as the harsh cold data will show. While this may sound like an academic exercise, it most certainly is not. The real-life impacts of this history and these decisions are significant. When we consider that wealth inequality in the U.S. has just reached its most extreme levels since before the Great Depression, it seems worthwhile to consider how the current tax system is contributing to this massive problem. When we look around and see how vast economic inequalities are negatively impacting American citizens by condemning them to lives of poverty, creating unequal access to basic needs like housing, food, education, and health care, contributing to an extreme imbalance between workers and owners, and fueling hyper-partisanship, it seems negligent not to examine the ways in which tax policies have laid the foundation for many of these issues. The truth is that the U.S. has been built on the ideal, the dream, that the government equally protects the rights of everyone to pursue their concept of happiness. This protected freedom includes establishing a system that provides an equal path to economic prosperity and upward mobility for one's family and children, goals achieved through hard work, education, innovation, sacrifice, and risk-taking. In 1931, the historian James T. Adams defined this concept of the American dream as
that dream of a land in which life should be better and richer and fuller for everyone, with opportunity for each according to ability and achievement.
One of our defining documents, the Declaration of Independence drafted by Thomas Jefferson, states,
"We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they shall be endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness."
The Founding Fathers, while drafting the Declaration and the Constitution, understood and expressed that inequitable taxation was a threat to the American dream and should not be established. It is quite clear that the very notion of the American dream is tied in many ways to the gargantuan U.S. tax code and its curious evolution throughout the centuries. It is also clear that we cannot sit idly by and watch as the American dream is suffocated within so many of our fellow citizens, especially in the millennial generation and those that follow, without speaking up. And this leads us to the big question: is there a better way? Spoiler alert. Yes, there is. We live in an age where technology has advanced in nearly every facet of life, making things that were unthinkable just a few short decades ago commonplace today. People perform complex banking transactions from their phones. Fitness trackers strapped to your wrists monitor myriad health conditions. Students attend college from their living rooms. In 2021 alone, Americans spent roughly $768 billion shopping online, and that figure is expected to exceed $1 trillion in the coming years. In short, there are a remarkable number of new technological capabilities in this dynamic 21st century economy. But before we plunge into the exciting and very real potential of reforming the U.S. tax code, let us briefly examine the code's larger historical context so that we might better understand the moment that we are living in and the policies that have brought us here.